That's a really long word. Of the leaf. Now, let's take, this is a verb, and this is a noun. Let's take the noun first, because then it'll become more obvious what this word is. This is the word that names the green coloring matter in leaves. Who knows what it is, Tanner? Chlorophyll. Let's see if I got the right number of blanks. Chlorophyll. Right. Now, Jeremy, what the alcohol did to the chlorophyll has that many letters. How many? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. If you have an 8-letter word that would fit, raise your hand. Jonathan thinks he has one.
Club.
Huh?
Club. That's 3.
I don't know. Well, he's saying rub, past tense, so that's not the right word. Megan? Good. Megan? Did the alcohol dissolve the chlorophyll? Yes. Chlorophyll is soluble in alcohol. I'm going to ask you to vote on this next question. I'm not going to write it down, but I'm going to have you vote. Raise your hand if you think that chlorophyll is soluble in water. Well, raise your hand if you think chlorophyll is not soluble in water. Who's somebody I haven't called on yet today that can tell me why you know that chlorophyll is not soluble in water? How do you know? Isn't there anybody I haven't called on that knows that? Somebody I haven't called on, tell me how you know that chlorophyll is not soluble in water. Justin, you had your hand up a little while ago. How do you know that chlorophyll is not soluble in water, Justin? Who's somebody I haven't called on that knows that? Brandon, how do you know that chlorophyll is not soluble in water? Because it's still colorless. The water's still colorless. Okay, so chlorophyll is soluble in alcohol, but not in water. Is alcohol good for plants? I'm going to have you raise your hand. Yes or no? How many think alcohol is good for plants? How many think alcohol is not good for plants? If it dissolves the chlorophyll, that should tell you that it's not good for plants. Okay, I'm going to tell you a story about something that happened to me in 1962. You all remember 1962?
Oh yeah, I do.
How many, raise your hand if your parents were born after 1962. A lot of your parents were born after 1962. Okay, well, okay, let me finish my story. In 1962,
Let him finish the story about
in 1962, I was teaching biology at Sammamish High School in Bellevue, Washington. All the other teachers on faculty knew that I was the biology teacher, and they figured I knew a lot about biology. So one of the teachers came up to me one day and she says, I have this beautiful, expensive plant about this tall in my living room, and it's turning brown. She said, I give it enough water, I give it enough fertilizer, the temperature's right, but it's turning brown. Why do you think it's turning brown? Well, I analyzed the data and drew a tentative conclusion. I knew that she hosted a lot of cocktail parties. She served a lot of martinis and daiquiris and pina coladas and margaritas. Okay, what I thought was probably happening is some of the people who didn't want to drink their whole drink were pouring it in the flower pot. That was my hypothesis, because I didn't have good enough data to actually prove it. But I had some good enough data to base the hypothesis on. So I said, okay, have somebody help you lift this great big pot outside, put it where it can drain into the ground, put the end of the hose in the top of the pot and turn it on just hard enough that it'll fill up the empty space right at the top of the pot but won't overflow, and then let it run for about a day. Why did I tell her to do that? Can anybody figure out why I told her to do that? Why do you think I told her to do that, Tanner?
It'll drain out all the
Alcohol soluble in water, so that would have flushed out the alcohol. Well, about a week later, she said, "Oh, my plant's doing beautifully now." What did that prove? That was the final data. What did that data item prove, Jackie?
That people are pouring drinks.
Well, it proved that there must have been alcohol that was causing the problem. So what I did was, I had the data, I analyzed it, I formed a tentative conclusion, I got more data, formed a final conclusion, which is what you're all learning how to do in this program. Okay, let's see. Who can tell me a word that ought to be in the conclusion that's not there yet? One, there are actually a couple. Who can tell me one word that ought to be in the conclusion that's not there yet, based on the data? Emily.
Chlorophyll.
Chlorophyll should be there. What's another one, Jeremy? You know that word.
Dissolve.
Dissolve. Okay. Alcohol dissolves chlorophyll but water doesn't. Okay, now I think anybody would tend to understand that conclusion now, with all of the wording it has. This all goes on the top of your paper. I didn't tell you that earlier. I'm hoping you didn't use more than the top of your paper for this part, because I want the bottom of the front of your paper to have some of the other information I'm going to give you now. I've drawn a couple of cells in past focus sessions. I drew a radish leaf cell and I drew a potato cell. Okay, this time I'm going to draw a geranium leaf cell. A geranium leaf cell. Who can figure out why I'm going to draw a geranium leaf cell? Why do you think I'm drawing a geranium leaf cell, Harley?
Because you have to drain your leaf.
That's a geranium leaf. Good.
What kind of
Okay.
tree does a geranium
Harley just analyzed the data and drew a conclusion. Okay.
Where does
Now, what?
where does the leaf come from? What kind of tree does it come from?
comes out the plant.
That's a
Well,
type of a
geraniums are an ornamental plant that are used in a lot of flower pots on patios and along sidewalks. When I was your age, they only came in red, but now plant specialists have developed purple ones and orange ones and white ones and pink ones. They're a very pretty plant, and I have some in a planter on my porch, so when I want to do this focus, I just go out and pick a couple leaves off. Okay, on the outside of all plant cells is this thick, fairly hard structure called what? Anybody remember, Wyatt?
Cell wall.
That's the cell wall. Did I tell you how to make paper? Did I ever tell you how paper is made?
hello. Cells.
Well, does anybody remember my telling you how paper is made from cell walls?
Oh, it's just
I guess I missed that with this class.
you said it.
I teach so many classes I can't remember. Well, I'll finish drawing the cell and then remind me to tell you the story about how paper is made. Okay, then inside there is this thin tissue paper-like structure that allows liquids to pass through but not solids. Who remember what that's called? Anybody remember what that's called, Tanner?
Cell membrane.
That's the cell membrane. Okay, it regulates osmosis. We've talked about osmosis in here, haven't we?
Yeah. Yes.
With the potato focus. Okay, then when I drew the potato cell, I told you that everything else in here is just called cell juices. Salts and sugars dissolve in water, cell juice. When you squeeze an orange cell, you get orange juice. When you squeeze an apple cell, you get apple juice. Okay, now that looks like the potato cell. But the radish leaf cell and the geranium leaf cell have an additional structure. Who knows what color the additional structure is? It's in radish leaves and geranium leaves. What color is it?
Green.
Green. They're little green spheres. No, they're not always spheres. When you get to high school biology, you'll look at a lot of leaf cells, and some will be spheres, some will be ribbon shaped, some will be elongated. These are called chloroplasts. Raise your hand if you remember what the word chloro means in Greek. What does it mean, Harley?
Like
Hear me. Chloro.
Doesn't mean,
Chlorophyll, chloroplast, green, right. And plastic means body, green body. Okay, so that's the way a radish leaf cell looks, and that's the way a geranium leaf cell looks. That's all you need to know as fifth graders. When you get to high school biology, you'll learn a lot of additional structures, and actually some of these will have different names too. Wyatt?
what about the membrane?
we already made that.
Cell membrane.
I meant the nucleus.
Oh, well, I'm not gonna draw the nucleus. Some cells have, most cells have a nucleus, but some don't. And you'll find out which ones don't when you get high school biology. Okay, well, since I haven't told you how to make paper, are you sure I didn't tell you how paper is made?
For sure.
Trees.
Okay, well, you probably
It's made
remember.
from the cell wall of a tree.
Well, I'll start telling you, and if you remember that I've told you this story before, stop me. You see a lot of log trucks go by here on the main street of Eatonville. Some are carrying Douglas fir logs, some are carrying hemlock logs, some are carrying alder logs, some are carrying maple logs, some are carrying cottonwood logs. All right. Most of the paper in this area is made from cottonwoods. Have I ever told you that? Nathan's nodding. He must remember. Okay, they're taking the cottonwood logs down to a manufacturing plant called pulp mill down on the Tacoma waterfront. Raise your hand if you've ever been to the Tacoma Dome.
I've been inside
Okay,
the pulp.
when you're in the parking lot of the Tacoma Dome, if you look right out toward Puget Sound, you see this building with a big cloud of steam. It always has a big cloud of steam over it, and that's the pulp mill. That's where they're taking the cottonwood logs. Okay? You can make paper out of just about any kind of plant cell, but cottonwood are the best ones around here. Okay, they grind them up into sawdust, and then they mix the sawdust with a chemical that takes out everything but the cell walls. Have I told you that before? Anybody remember my telling you that? Anna's nodding, but a lot of you, how many of you don't remember my telling you that? Well, I don't think Nathan and Tanner were in here all by themselves, so they must have heard it somewhere else. Okay. What they're left with is the cell walls of the cottonwood cells mixed with water. It looks sort of like malt of meal or brown cream of wheat. It's called pulp. Okay, then they spread it out on trays, press the water out of it, and dry it into sheets, and that makes brown paper like this, like the inside of this cardboard lid. If they want to make white paper like the outside, they have to bleach it. And so white paper, that causes white paper to be more expensive than brown paper because they have to go through that extra process. Raise your hand if you've ever smelled a pulp mill. Anybody ever smelled a pulp mill? Well, most of the pulp mills have had to clean up their waste disposal systems in the last few years because of environmental laws. So you don't smell them as much as you used to. Who can describe how a pulp mill smells? Anybody want to describe it? How does a pulp mill smell, Harley?
It smells
Like what?
sawdust.
No. Tanner?
Like rotten eggs.
Well, it smells like rotten eggs, but most of you probably haven't smelled rotten eggs either.
I have.
It stinks. The reason a pulp mill stinks is because of the bleach. It's the bleach that has that odor. Okay? So that's how paper is made. Now, the ancient Egyptians made the first paper called papyrus, and they made it out of the cell walls of reeds growing along the Nile River. Who knows what the Chinese make paper out of? Who knows? Who knows for sure, without guessing, what the Chinese make paper out of?
Paper mache.
Harley?
Bamboo? Oh my
You
gosh.
didn't know, Harley. Rice straw. After they harvest the rice, then they chop up the rice straw and treat it the same way as the cottonwood, and they make rice paper. Raise your hand if you ever heard of rice paper. All right, it's used a lot of times as wallpaper. Okay, so you can make paper out of the cell walls of just about any kind of plant, but some are better than others. Okay, you should have that on the bottom of your record sheet. But I have some additional information. If you need the back for the additional information, it's okay to use the back, because I want to tell you about some alcohols.
They don't need to use it.
There are a lot of different kinds of alcohols, but I'm going to tell you about the three most common ones. One of them is called ethyl alcohol. Ethyl.
You taught us
That's
about
it. That's in beer and wine.
You taught us this.
Right, I'm telling you again.
Oh.
It's in beer and wine. Who remembers what kind of living organism can make ethyl alcohol? It's from a previous focus. What, Allie?
Grapes?
No? Well, that's used as the food for what, Allie? The grapes are used as the food for what? Jeremy?
Oh, I was gonna say yeast.
Yeast. Yeast make ethyl alcohol. It's in beer and wine. Then there's methyl alcohol. That's called wood alcohol because it's made from wood. Raise your hand if you've ever smelled wood pitch in a firewood. You smell the pitch in a firewood? A lot of the odor from pitch is from the methyl alcohol that's in it. Plants that form pitch form, among other compounds, methyl alcohol. And the way they make the methyl alcohol, purify it, is they heat sawdust up to a temperature just high enough that it's not quite burning, but it's hot enough to evaporate the methyl alcohol off. Now, methyl alcohol is used mainly for heating food in cafeterias and at brunches. How many of you have ever been in a cafeteria or brunches where they had a burner underneath the tray? Those are alcohol burners, and they burn methyl alcohol because it's the cheapest kind of alcohol. Okay, then there's isopropyl. Somebody ought to be able to tell me the common name of isopropyl alcohol. What is it, Chase? No. Common name of isopropyl alcohol.
Are you supposed to know?
Rubbing alcohol.
Rubbing alcohol. Charlie, was there anything in like
All right. Now, underneath your list of alcohols, write this statement, and I'm going to write it in red because it's so important. All alcohols kill brain cells if you drink them. All right, well, normally you don't drink rubbing alcohol. What do you do with rubbing alcohol? You rub it. Where do you rub it, and when do you rub it?
I think you're supposed to rub it on like burns.
No, well, it's used as a disinfectant also. But what do you rub it, rubbing alcohol on? Anybody know that, Emily? No. Well, it's used for that, but that's not why it's called rubbing alcohol. You know,
like your muscles are sore.
if you have sore muscles from too much exercise the day before, you put rubbing alcohol, rub it in, and take the pain away. Okay, now, this is an important statement. All alcohols kill brain cells if you drink them. If you rub rubbing alcohol on your skin, it doesn't kill brain cells. Okay. I'm gonna give you some figures that illustrate the different poisonous levels of these alcohols. They're not